You are now listening to the Hot Take Podcast, brought to you by Full Time Fantasy. Here are your hosts, Stephen Tironi and Josh Daly. Time to make it hot.
Welcome to the show. It is the Hot Take Podcast, and we are back and better than ever. I am joined by my co-host, Josh Daly. What is going on, my friend? It is a pleasure to be back with you, talking fantasy football for the third week in a row here in the off-season.
Yeah, man, excited to be back on and plenty to talk about here. We now know when the new league season is going to start, so we should have some really exciting free agent news instead of rumors coming up. So it's getting exciting, man.
We were just talking off air about everything that's going on, obviously, with the coronavirus. It's tough not to talk about it, but NBA season was just suspended. So what I'm gathering right now is it's on hiatus. Rudy Gobert was it looks like that he himself tested positive for coronavirus. So
and Emmanuel Mudiay now as well, same team.
Emmanuel Mudiay. So it came out earlier that they shut down the game. There was fans waiting. There was a lot of controversy surrounding the OKC and Jazz game, and then they just canceled the game. And then soon later, within like 20 minutes, I'm telling you, the NBA season suspended. So it's pretty crazy. So we got we're going to obviously speculate and see what is going to happen with the NFL draft. That's what we were talking about off air. It was like, what's going to happen with the NFL draft now? So a lot of things to consider, but we're going to talk some good old-fashioned fantasy football today, and I'm excited to be joined by Jesse Reeves of playerprofiler.com. So we have a special guest for you. What is going on, Mr. Jesse Reeves?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on tonight. I know a lot of the craziness going on right now with this coronavirus and everything. It's kind of nice to interact with people through the interwebs and not have to worry about getting infected, huh?
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. Well, and you got all that daylight behind you right there with in sunny. Now, what was the city that you're actually in right now?
Oh, I'm just a small suburb town, Brentwood, right outside of San Francisco. It's probably about 45 minutes east of there. So
not to be confused with Brentwood in Southern California.
Yes, Brentwood, and believe it or not, I think Brentwood in Southern California is like it's not even like a city or like a town. It's like
well, it's a part of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, exactly. It's like like when you go to New York, how there's like boroughs inside of the actual city. I think it's something similar to that. I don't know. I'm no geography major or anything.
And then rumor has it, if you're in Brentwood at a certain time of day, you can still see OJ walk by or drive by in that white Bronco.
I don't know. I caught him at my local my local Costco the other day, and he was buying up all the toilet paper, dude.
Dang, yeah, there was a problem with that. Yeah, he ended up getting all of it.
The picture was wild.
I'd be scared if he was buying all the bleach.
Dude, and he opened himself up for some scrutiny there because people were commenting and they were like, only you would have the power to kill the coronavirus or something. And I'm like, oh, OJ, dude, you got to stop posting, dude. Stop posting on Twitter, bro.
Like, I wish I could say, yeah, man, good for OJ owning it. But no, not in this case here.
Not at all.
No. So, Jesse, real quick, please talk to everybody about what you're doing over at Player Profile and the model you've been working on. And then that'll lead us into what the next question I'm going to ask you about which wide receiver prospect you're higher on than the consensus at this point.
Yeah, so right now over at Player Profile, I'm working on doing a couple prospect profiles. I believe I have 4 on my slate, so some big names there. We're just going to get some profiles out, get some of the like where we kind of have them ranked at Player Profiler, where they're on our consensus ranks, where we have them with our combine metrics, and anybody who's visited the website over there, incredible data, free platform that everybody gets to use, and you guys can go to these player pages. For example, I'll give a little sneak peek. I have a Jalen Reagor profile coming up. You guys can go over to his page, check out all his combine metrics, where he ranks in terms of percentiles for physical metrics, all that good stuff. And I'll actually have just my own personalized profile coming out on him. So you can expect a couple of those in terms of written content for what I'm doing right now at Player Profiler. And then I'm working on a project called the Rookie Index, and that's set to come out on April 6th. And you kind of mentioned it in terms like right now I've just been in a dungeon and just working with spreadsheets mostly and creating models to help predict where these rookies are going to land right now. And currently in the middle of my wide receiver model. And it's just grinding out data right now, man. Just pretty much just coming up with these models that I can include for people that can give them a good idea of where I have these guys ranked and what they can expect from them coming into this class. So that in terms of what I have for content wise, doing a podcast with my co-host Matt Gujeski to the Draft Dialogue. We have individual episodes dropping weekly or daily, about prospects that we're just profiling. So those are about 10 to 15 minute profiles that we have. We do it on a live show, cut it up, throw it on YouTube for video purposes, and then throw it on a podcast feed. So a lot of content just coming out right now. It's that time of year. This is the time where we just kind of, we hit the boosters and just kind of go all in and pump out as much content on this rookie class, get these dynasty folks ready for what's going to happen in April. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now, what I'm working on.
Very nice, man. Yeah. And, all of that at playerprofiler.com. And of course, I've mentioned Player Profiler on here. And again, in my early writing days with Fantrax, I would use it as a resource. I actually, when I first got into this industry, I actually hit up Matt Kelly. I DM'd him after he followed me. And I just said, is it okay to source your stuff, when I'm writing? And I think he really appreciated that. So I've had, quite a little bit of a relationship with him as well. And it's just, a pleasure to have you on. First of all, Jesse, if you don't know playerprofile.com, check it out. And understand that, they took a chance with Jesse because they saw talent in you, my friend. And just understand that we recognize that in the industry. To preface the show here, we're going to be talking about the free agent running backs today. We're going to talk a little bit of dynasty, as we're going to do in these early episodes here in the offseason. I want to talk relevance. That's why we're going to talk about some best ball darlings. You're going to need to know we got best ball drafts going to come out soon, so I'm really excited. We were talking about last week, Josh, where you can get some advantage early on in the season. Nothing like best ball early on, man. I mean, you want to get some teams.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a good time to, put what you already know to the test, especially if you're, kind of a believer in some coaching schemes or situations and things like that. I mean, it's very my most profitable best ball teams last year were the ones I drafted early and the ones that I drafted right before kickoff.
Well, Tyreek Hill, that was the one, right? If you drafted Tyreek Hill in like the 7th round, what a team you have. Your receivers are just ridiculous.
You lucked out if you were to be able to get – I mean, I sold them in the midst of everything in terms of just overall dynasty and stuff. I sold them for whatever value I had, but, man, I'm telling you, I'm regretting it right now. So when people bring up that name, dude –
Oh, man,
because you probably were able to get them fairly cheap with somebody that was just like, nah, just get him out of here. I don't – which was me. So,
man. I'm sorry about your luck, and sorry to bring that up because that sounds very painful.
It's all right, dude. I just heard his name. I was like, damn it.
Well, we're going to move on, and hopefully you get the guy that you're about to talk about to make up for that loss. So talk to me about a wide receiver right now that you're higher on than the consensus. And when I say the consensus, I mean the rest of the fantasy industry. Who are you higher on? Maybe it's not a first-round pick in the rookie draft, and you think that there's going to be sustained value from this guy.
Yeah. So right now, early impressions, I would probably say somebody a guy that not too many people are talking about. Some of the savants are, but for the most part, I would say a guy that grades out just kind of middle of the pack, but poses really good upside in this class is Gabriel Davis out of UCF. So for me, like I said, he grades out average, like 60th percentile, 70th percentile in most of my my weighted metrics right now in terms of like I use in my model, I use average dominator over average, which is a Peter Howard stat who gracefully blessed us with that free information. That is a big component of something that I use in my model. Grades out really decently there, I would say probably about the 60th percentile. So going on from that, he grades out really well. That's actually kind of generous. He grades out pretty average, but from what I can see from the metrics that I have on him is he's a guy that you kind of probably the safest guy to throw a dart on outside of the first 2 rounds right now. So you're probably looking at, he's just an even keel kind of guy, but he has good upside probably never going to give you a wide receiver one season. That's perfectly fine. But with the expectation of spending a late third or mid third of in your dynasty drafts, he's a guy that could probably return fringe wide receiver two seasons for fantasy. And he's somebody that I definitely am looking to get at a bargain. So Gabriel Davis, I'm probably much higher on him than a lot of other people. He'll probably crack my top 12 wide receivers, maybe kiss that wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12 range. But yeah, I really like him. I like where he's grading out in my model right now and what I see from him.
So, I just pulled up Player Profiler, and it looks like his best, run at the combine was his speed score. So, why is his speed score so high at 78th percentile compared to, I guess you incorporate his size at 216, he's 6'2", and he ran the 4.5 40. So that speed score, is that something that we can look into as like, okay, that's his advantage, and that can maybe make him ascend from that average, as you put it, to maybe that wide receiver 2 type of guy in a given season?
I wouldn't wait too much on the speed score. The 40, these things definitely contribute in terms of combine metrics. They definitely contribute to a culmination of physical metrics that should be weighted that can predict fantasy points. But in terms of just the speed score alone, I wouldn't put too much weight into that. I wouldn't plan on that being the reason why he would elevate himself into a wide receiver 2 status. I would probably lean more to the fact that he's an age 20 breakout right now, and he's got a 34.4% dominator rating. College dominator rating, that is. So, which means he definitely was able to grab a big percentage of the UCF market share while he was there over the past 2 years. You see in his 2018 season, he snagged 815 yards and 7 touchdowns, had a 65.4% catch rate. All this information, again, on Player Profiler too. 2019 really exploded, 72 receptions for 1,241 yards and 12 touchdowns. So that's where we kind of see that surge of him when he broke out. Yeah, exactly. We see what he's capable of. So in terms of definitely, I would say his weight adjusted speed score looks great, predictable. It has a correlation in predicting fantasy points, but that won't be the reason. The reason is he's going to walk into a system that might be a little depleted at the wide receiver position. He might get a little added, hopefully is depleted at the wide receiver position, and he might get a little bit of added volume off the jump, and then you'll see him have usable weeks and probably squeak himself into a couple wide receiver 2. Maybe if he has a high, a very, very high ceiling week, he squeaks into that top 12 on a couple rare occasions, but that would probably be my projection for him, is a guy who's just going to play his career, and he's going to be that fringe wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 mold. And that might even be a little too generous. But with the value that I said, with you getting him at that wide receiver, that round 3, in the middle of round 3, early round 4 in your rookie drafts, that's pretty good upside, pretty good value there.
And Jesse, before we move on, and I think that Gabriel Davis is a guy that you can certainly get at the end of the 3rd round, as you mentioned, which is just, a great value in these rookie drafts. So a great name to keep your eye on going into any sort of dynasty rookie draft. Obviously in redraft, you're probably not drafting him depending on, where he lands. If he lands in a juicy situation, obviously you have to consider that. But just talk to me real quick. I have Ceedee Lamb as my wide receiver 1. I don't think that there's an argument. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, no, I don't really see anybody taking over. The only guy that I can really think right now that would overtake Ceedee for the number 1 spot would be Tyler Johnson, and that he would have to be like the number 1 wide receiver overall. He would have to be, because Tyler Johnson in my model right now grades in the 90th percentile across the board on every single dominator, market share of receiving yards, average receiving yards per pass attempt, everything across the board in efficiency and production. Tyler Johnson is by far and away the best wide receiver in this class. But at least from where I sit with my nerdy spreadsheet open, but it would be Tyler Johnson, Jalen Reagor, and Ceedee Lamb, in no particular order except Tyler Johnson. If he were to have that 1st round draft capital, he would definitely skyrocket up the board for me. But that doesn't look like it's going to be a possibility with him kind of skipping out on the Combine and the Senior Bowl and the NFLPA game, I believe, or it was the Shrine game that he kind of ditched out on. There's been questions about his character and whatnot. So I think you have to adjust and move him down. But right now it's pretty much Ceedee Lamb and Jalen Reagor that are in their own class. And I say Ceedee Lamb is definitely a guy who just grades out very, very favorably across the board in terms of average receiving yards per pass attempt. He's in the 90th percentile, 70th percentile in average dominator over average.
Yeah, I mean, and real quick, because, we do have to move on. But, I mean, honestly, if you're listening to this right now and you're doing the Dynasty Draft coming up, you're getting a lot of great details. So lucky you for listening to this show. How condescending is that? Like, that's like no, thanks for listening. We love our listeners. And no, I mean, I'm telling you, Ceedee, you could make the argument even in Superflex, and I know that I'll be chastised by our guys that love drafting quarterbacks. I mean, Tua and Joe Burrow, right? Those are the guys. I mean, you can argue the situation that they're going into, not the best, right? And, you got Jonathan Taylor, you got guys like Ceedee Lamb. I mean, I could really see myself thinking about it, even in the Superflex.
We're recording this on his pro day, too. Did you guys see that just disgusting catch that he made in the corner of the end zone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He makes circus. Yeah. He just makes these circus
right.
catches, and he's just an absolute animal. He's not a guy from everything that I've watched on him too. Cause yes, I do like to watch a little bit of film on the guys that I evaluate.
How dare you?
Everything that I've seen, I know, right? I can't do both. Gosh forbid. No, on everything that I've seen from him, he is just an absolute physical animal at the catch point. He's a guy that can track the ball very, very well. He doesn't supply you with a ton of speed, but he just doesn't really need it. He makes these circus-like catches that almost make you just drop your jaw. He's a consistent guy, great hands, and he's fair and nuanced in route running enough to beat coverages, and that's what you need from your wide receiver position. You need them to be able to leverage themselves against coverage and
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to compare him or anyone to Julio Jones, but obviously, the comparison's there. He's not as tall as Julio, but I see that sort of freakish athlete, and I see the sustained success of somebody like him. I really think that, it's a different kind. Like, his body type more resembles Des Bryant than anything. And he can be that physical guy, but what he is, he can stop on a dime. And like you said, the point of the catch, he gets to and wins those balls so well. So that's a lot of Julio, kind of Des Bryant in there. So he is those things. So I think that if you take a top 3 pick with him, that's where you're going to get him there. I don't think he's dropping past 3 right now. So
it's Joe Burrow and then Jonathan Taylor and then Ceedee Lamb. Those are the top 3 in my opinion.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of these free agent tight ends. We're going to talk really quickly about these. Josh, I'll toss it up to you. Hunter Henry, who the Chargers, and then Jesse will obviously get your input on this. Chargers probably going to franchise tag him. I imagine he'll be a Charger next year. And then we have Austin Hooper, who potentially same sort of thing. And then Eric Ebron is actually on the free agent market. So which of these guys, Josh, are you more interested in, and where do you think that they'll land?
Well, from a free agency perspective, I think that Austin Hooper's situation is the most interesting. I'll let Jesse talk about Hunter Henry. Love me some Hunter Henry, my goodness. But I'll let Jesse talk about him because he's the Chargers guy. But the Austin Hooper situation is, that's a lock that he's leaving Atlanta. They're just in salary cap hell right now. And, they can't afford anybody. Even if they let Devontae Freeman go, they still don't even have enough cap space, to sign or to franchise tag Hooper. So, it's tough, man, because they waited a few years here, and he's kind of, we see tight ends take a few years to develop. And he had some elite fantasy production last year, and we were talking about best ball at the beginning of the show. Shout out to Sean Corner last year. He had Austin Hooper very highly ranked and was touting him, and I had him on a ton of best ball teams. And I think it's going to be interesting because Green Bay just cut Jimmy Graham earlier today, and I feel like that is a very logical landing spot for him
in Atlanta.
For Hooper to go from Atlanta to Green Bay, right? So it's definitely interesting, even though we really haven't seen a tight end be successful there since Jermichael Finley. But he's the guy I'm most interested in. I think that if Eric Ebron leaves Indy, that definitely leaves the door open for them to maybe sign somebody. But I think it's very interesting for Jack Doyle, and I think his value takes a massive tick upward with that.
Jimmy Graham, signing like a vet minimum with Atlanta kind of makes sense too, right?
Oh yeah, they could definitely switch teams. I mean, that's about the only thing Atlanta can afford right now.
Right. That would be very interesting. I don't know if Austin Hooper lands in Green Bay. I don't know if I'm as interested, just because, like you said, Jermichael Finley, and like that was just kind of like a weird fluke season. So, I don't know how much, like obviously if they paid him, then you maybe say follow the money there. But if he lands in Green Bay, I don't know if that's an ideal spot for him. Now, Eric Ebron, I think he's a talented tight end. I think that, he is what he is. And I think we saw him as a Colt really excel, obviously, with a guy like Andrew Luck. So if you put Eric Ebron in somewhere like Green Bay, yeah, I think I would buy that. I would, and I think maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I think that what Eric Ebron showed us with the Colts in that Andrew Luck years, he doesn't have to be on the field for, 60% of snaps. He could be on the field for even 35% of snaps and get 2 touchdowns. And Aaron Rodgers likes to throw touchdowns. So I would see that as maybe, I don't know about more of an appeal than Austin Hooper. I think Austin Hooper's a better player at this point, but I just see the better fit for Eric Ebron. So Jesse, talk to us about Hunter Henry. Is he a lock as a Charger, or is he going somewhere else?
No, they're going to lock him down. They're going to lock him down. I think for the most part, one of the biggest reasons you saw Austin Ekeler get locked up to a contract is because they knew that they were going to have to franchise Hunter Henry. You can only, I believe, I'm not nuanced in, or I don't really know franchise tags as much as some of those guys over at like OTC or anything like that. But I do know, I don't think you can apply 2. You can only have 1 for one player, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe so. You have to designate it to 1 player. Josh,
right. Yeah.
That's what
one franchise, and then you can do the transition tag as well. But I mean, that makes a ton of sense for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest reasons you saw Austin Ekeler get signed to a multi-year contract is because they wanted to be able to franchise Hunter Henry. The fact of the matter is Hunter Henry has yet to put 16 up over the past couple seasons. He put 12 games up, 12 games in 2017, 12 games this year, missed 2018 with that ACL injury. I think franchising him is the smart decision. We know what he can do, even in the 12 games this year. We only saw 652 receiving yards, but that ranks the 9th from the tight end, 5 total touchdowns, which was kind of alarming for the most part. We thought that Hunter Henry's value was going to come from that red zone, from having that red zone capability for Phillip Rivers. But the fact of the matter is that the Chargers, when they did make it to the red zone, they were either trying to give Melvin Gordon or Austin Ekeler the ball 3 straight times to punch that thing in, or Phillip Rivers was throwing a pick. So there wasn't too much value to go around for Hunter Henry in that offense down the stretch inside the 20s for the most part. So we did see him grade out fairly well, though, in terms of just overall tight ends in the 2019 class. I mean, he graded very well in terms of catch rate, 13th among tight ends. Yards per reception, 11.9. That's 11th among tight ends. I think we know what he can do, and giving him that franchise tag was perfect. I think you want to keep him on the team, but we want to get healthy Hunter Henry. That's what we want, because a healthy Hunter Henry that can put 16 games in a season is hopefully going to be playing more than 16 games for the team, because he's going to be a vital asset. He'll be playing, 16 and then 17, 18, 19, hopefully all the way into the Super Bowl.
If he does put together that 16-game season, does he earn himself a paycheck?
Absolutely.
Before we move on, Josh, anybody else at the tight end or anything else to add?
No, I mean, not unless you guys really want to talk about Jason Witten, but just curious.
Going back to ESPN, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the best landing spot if we could.
Man, no, that would be.
Or is it? Yeah.
Oh gosh, that would be so bad.
No, I think the only thing I was going to add was that just with Eric Ebron. I mean, there's a couple of teams that kind of make sense. I mean, I could see the Patriots taking a stab on him for sure. Maybe the Bears if Nagy's kind of done with Trey Burton. So I mean, it just
Trey Burton could be done. That's a weird thing.
Yeah, and then
He was
maybe
so hyped a couple seasons ago.
Oh,
It
man.
was literally Trey Burton was a top 12 a top 12 tight end asset.
It's looking rough for him, but yeah, that's a good call, Josh. I mean, Eric Ebron to Chicago or New England. I mean, obviously, if they want Tom Brady back, giving him a tight end, I think is
watch out for Adam Troutman in this class. He's a small school, athletic, super freak tight end, and the Bears just seem to fawn over those types of guys. So watch out for him.
He sounds like someone that would play for the Bears.
Yeah, I saw him. I evaluated a little bit of him, not deeply yet, but I saw him and I was like, that guy's a Chicago Bear. I just knew it.
All right, so let's get into some of these running backs, and going from Hunter Henry, let's just stay with the Chargers. That's the theme, guys. Sorry if you've listened to last week's episode and this week's episode. Look, we're talking Chargers. They're interesting, and right now their team could wind up with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback. It could be Tom Brady. We have no idea who's going to quarterback the Chargers in 2020, and it's kind of a cool situation. So Melvin Gordon, look, we obviously know that Austin Ekeler got paid, and Austin Ekeler didn't get paid like the Chargers say, hey, you're our guy. That's it. We don't need anybody else. They paid him like he's going to be a piece of that offense for years to come. And, Jesse, what does that mean for you? To you? Do you think Melvin Gordon is gone, or do you think that, the writing's on the wall and he's burned his bridge over there?
Yeah, burned his bridge might be a little bit of a harsh statement because I believe they're leaving on good terms. I think that they're at a crossroads. They're at a disagreement. The franchise is not valuing the position. They believe that for whatever reason that they don't need his production right now to be an efficient offense, and that's just kind of how it goes. Sometimes it's a business, and sometimes guys they got to go. I think he is going to test the free agent market, and I'm hard pressed to say that he's going to end up as a Charger. I don't think he's going to be a Charger. I think that the franchise more than anything signed Ekeler to, I don't want to call it peanuts, but it's a value-based deal for Austin Ekeler. You're talking about, I believe it was 24 or 26 over 4, and that comes out to about 6. Yeah, that comes out to about $6 million a year, which is not anywhere near what like Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott or anything is getting. So that doesn't tell me that they are looking to get bell cow volume, bell cow back work out of Austin Ekeler. He's going to kind of remain in the same place. So I think the franchise is letting Melvin go. They're not going to pay him anywhere near that top back dollar, even if he is probably within that top 5 to 7 running backs. I will say that he is a very good running back, but with the crop of running backs that's coming in at the top of this class this year, it's very conceivable that they can grab a Cam Akers at the beginning of round 3, or if they can swindle their way into some extra draft capital if they have to trade up for a guy like, I don't know, Tua, say.
I'll always compare, make the comparison to the Cowboys, right?
Yeah.
The leading rusher in the NFL, DeMarco Murray, 1,800 yards, sets the record for the Cowboys.
Yep.
And me at the time, being a Cowboys fan, not a Cowboys fan anymore. And then that's a long story. I'm not going to get into it. But I'm not a fan of any football team right now. But DeMarco Murray, I was pulling for because I liked him as a football player, and I wanted them to re-sign him. They elected not to. What do? They signed Ezekiel Elliott, who is arguably a generational talent, who is behind a very, cushy offensive line, and they made a great business deal. Yep. So what you're saying right now is they can make a great deal and not pay Melvin Gordon, right?
Exactly.
And get a Cam Akers, who you took the words right out of my mouth. We were just talking about Akers last week, me and Josh were. That would be so ideal for the Chargers to pair Ekeler with somebody like Cam Akers.
Exactly. And I think that was just kind of the goal. I think they knew from the beginning of last year they weren't going to pay Melvin Gordon. I think the biggest issue is that they didn't trade him off, man. They should have traded him, got some sort of compensation for him. But either way, yeah, he's firmly, I believe he's going to be out, and you should probably start looking at destinations that fit his skill set the most.
Great segue, man. You're a professional because, Josh, where does Melvin Gordon fit? And, one thing I will say before I toss it up to you, Josh, is we know Melvin Gordon's going to get paid more than Austin Ekeler wherever he does it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. Jesse said, he could still be in that 5 to or 5 to 7 top, running back class. I think maybe he falls a little outside of there personally. I fantasy wise anyway, I do have him ranked, well outside that range. But he's still talented for sure. And I mean, the holdout last year, all that did was just kind of keep him fresh for longer. So it's not like he has a ton of mileage on him. And, he did save himself a little bit last year, but I think Houston would be a fantastic landing spot for him. I think if there's any one single player that has influence over their team's personnel decisions, that's not a quarterback, and also a huge influence on their city, it'd be J.J. Watt, also a Wisconsin Badger. And I think, he's going to get his boy over to Houston because we know Lamar Miller's done. I mean, I can't see a scenario where they bring him back again.
Right.
I mean, maybe they do and sign Gordon, but I think Gordon makes the most sense to go to Houston personally. I mean, I feel like he's a pretty decent fit in that offense as well. I think he still has, plenty of gas left in the tank. And it's just, like Jesse was saying, the Chargers can easily replace him at this point. They just signed Ekeler, and I just don't see where Gordon would go back, even though, I don't think he'd burn that bridge with Talasco or whatnot, but it's just, I think, a done deal that he's gone, and he'll probably end up somewhere like Houston. I think Houston's the number one landing spot on my list.
Oh man. If he goes to Houston, I mean, that is monumental. And I would love Gordon's situation, obviously, with Deshaun Watson in that Houston offense, because if we were happy with Carlos Hyde's production, I mean, what's Melvin Gordon going to do?
Yeah, right.
And, another team I'll throw out real quick is the Eagles. Now, I hate to say that because I am a Miles Sanders truther, and I want him to have that backfield. But, Jordan Howard, the guy who we're going to talk about here, is, a free agent. He could be on the move. If he goes away, which looks like he might, I could see the offense of the Eagles, wanting to go and actually finally get, that, because it hasn't worked, I don't think, with the committee approach as far as, obviously they won the Super Bowl, so you could argue, it did work, but that was obviously, a miracle type season for the Eagles. I just think that if Jordan Howard left, you could see him fitting in with that Eagles offense. And that way, you don't have to give Melvin Gordon 25, 30 carries. Not a great fantasy situation if he ends up there. You don't want to see any fantasy running back end up with the Eagles because that Doug Peterson is just going to keep adding running backs to the mix. They'll find anybody off the street and just put him in there behind center just as a running back. So any other spot for Melvin Gordon, Jesse, that you can think of off the top before we move on?
I know he's being linked to Tampa right now, and hoping I know fantasy situation-wise, that's probably a really, really good spot. We saw what Arians did for a guy like DJ a couple years ago, and how he kind of flourished in that system. I think for the most part, though, you're looking at I will say this. I really, really don't want him to go to Houston because there's a particular running back in this class that I think fits really, really well with what Houston does, and he can just absolutely explode into a top 12 running back if he lands there. I do like Melvin Gordon there, but I hope he doesn't take up residency there just because for my own selfish needs. And if you're wondering, the guy's J.K. Dobbins, who I hope goes to Houston. But that's a different
I was thinking Dobbins or Swift. I was thinking Dobbins or Swift.
It's Dobbins, dude. But it's just, that's a different conversation for another day because I really, really think that he fits there. But Melvin Gordon, he is absolutely I think he'd be a great fit in Tampa. I think that was a link that was kind of made when the holdout was happening as well, before the trade deadline happened. I think there was kind of a link being made between Tampa there, Peyton Barber potentially on his way out. And so really you guys kind of hit it right on the head. I think there's a couple landing spots for a guy with Melvin Gordon's talents. I think he'd be great in almost any system as long as you're not asking him to be just this like scat weird, wildcat back.
Right.
But yeah, I think he's going to flourish kind of wherever he goes.
Yeah, this is like deja vu all over again, man. This is what we were doing last year, where everybody thought the Chargers would trade him to the Bucks or to Texans, and it's like, oh well, wherever he goes, Le'Veon will probably sign with the other one or the Jets, and it's like all over again. But one thing I did want to add in I added one guy to the sheet here, Jordan Howard. We were just talking about the Eagles. They were trying. If you guys remember, the Eagles were trying to trade for Melvin Gordon last year, and they dangled Jordan Howard out there.
Right, I remember.
Complete disrespect. Disrespectful.
I love everything.
Poor Jordan Howard.
Yeah, you guys all make great points because he could definitely go to Philly. They were obviously interested last year, but I think that just kind of locks up the fact that Howard is not going to come back. But I could definitely see Lamar Miller leaving Houston and filling Howard's spot in Philly personally. So I feel like it's kind of if that happens, we might have like this musical chairs where they just kind of all switch places here. But a lot different than the quarterback free agent class. A ton of free agents going to be moving all over the place at the running back spot.
Yeah, if Lamar Miller or Carlos Hyde end up on the Eagles, I think that's a good situation for Miles Sanders. So I think that's, it's almost like inevitable that the Eagles will replace Jordan Howard with somebody. I mean, they're not going to just leave Miles Sanders and everybody else. If they do, obviously, Miles Sanders' value skyrockets in redraft. One of those guys probably going to end up at Eagles, seems like, between Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde. And then it gets very interesting who takes their places. Let's talk about the Cardinals situation. I think that's a very interesting one because you got Kenyan Drake, who, really ascended last year. Yet to be determined if Kenyan Drake broke out or not, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if he broke out. I need to see it one more time. And what I'm talking about is at the end of last year, 22 carries, 137 yards for 4 touchdowns, 24 carries for 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 12 for 60 for 1. Just a great end to the season for Drake. Not the first time we've really seen that where he's ascended at the end of the year. 2 years ago, he did have very nice end to the year with the Dolphins. Even with Adam Gase, trying to do anything he could to not let, a talented running back run wild. But Josh, talk to me here. What's going on with Kenyan Drake? And then, incidentally, what's going on with David Johnson? Is there a scenario where both of these guys are Cardinals next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury has already came out and said, like, they would love to have both of these guys there. I mean, I think that they're going to have to tag Drake to get him to stay. But, as far as did Drake actually break out last year or not, I mean, this is really the first time we've seen him like in an extended role after Chase Edmonds went down. And I don't know. So in that sense, I kind of feel like this is the first time he's actually had an opportunity to break out, which is nice. I mean, they would be nuts to not bring him back though, with how much he flourished at the end of the season. And I feel like that's the most common scenario would be to keep Drake there and then to have David Johnson move on. And I know, 2 weeks ago, we talked about at the end of February on our first offseason episode that, that David Johnson for O.J. Howard trade would make a ton of sense. Since we've recorded that, I've kind of looked into it. And I mean, it doesn't seem like the Bucs coaching staff is down on O.J. Howard and that they have any sort of inclination in trading him. But obviously that would make a ton of sense for both clubs. But at the end of the day, I do think the scenario is possible they both stay, but I feel like it's too much for them to keep both guys, especially if you're going to be paying Drake franchise tag money. David Johnson's got to go.
Yeah, for sure. And, they owe him $10.2 million. So they can't, when it came out it actually came out that they were going to cut him. And then we're, like, oh man, it's happening. Like they're going to cut him. And, no, that doesn't make any sense. They owe him $10.2 million. So it really,
right.
they're in kind of a sticky situation too. So it does feel like the best thing they can do is just keep him. And you have a decent backup running back. I mean, because that's what he would be, is he would play second fiddle to Kenyan Drake. And then, if you're a Chase Edmonds dynasty owner, you're not happy about that situation for this season. So that's another, player to bring into this mix, of course, because, if David Johnson goes and then all of a sudden the scenario, it's going to be tough. There's no way I don't think that both of these guys leave. But if that happened, then Chase Edmonds obviously rises. Jesse, what do you make of this Cardinals situation? Do you think both guys end up being Cardinals next year, or do you think David Johnson, they're going to figure out a way to trade him?
Yeah, as far as I checked last, I think David Johnson is way heavily against the cap, so they can't just outright release him without just taking a huge hit to their cap number this year.
Right.
I could be totally wrong, but I believe
that's
that's
right.
what I saw.
Yep.
And with that said, I think Kenyan Drake is kind of the piece that you either ride or die with David Johnson, or you sign Kenyan Drake and you keep David Johnson and you just kind of you let him, be the change of pace guy there. Unless you really think that David Johnson can come in and kind of reprise his role as being that lead back. I did have concerns when Cliff Kingsbury took over. We didn't see, especially with David Johnson being that 2,000 purpose yard back a couple of seasons ago, 2,000 all-purpose yards back, scrimmage, whatever you want to call it right now. But we saw him top that 2,000-yard mark, receiving and rushing. A couple of seasons ago, I did have some concern with Cliff Kingsbury because he had a history of not really giving his running backs too much passing volume in his spread system. A lot of that volume went to the wide receiver position, as he generally had no less than three wide receivers on the field at a time. And so a ton of that volume wasn't going to be going to the running back position, which to me kind of said that David Johnson was going to have deflated value either way. And so I'm not sure what they do with David Johnson right now, but I do think Kenyan Drake has definitely usurped him as the guy there. I think that he should be the guy. I think they should probably look to maybe potentially sign him to a cap friendly deal. But again, that's hard when you have one running back already on the roster with so much of being a liability in terms of cap number and cap space. So it's a murky situation. It's going to be hard to kind of decipher. If they could trade David Johnson, that would be awesome. I think the only scenario there is you ride both those dudes out until David Johnson's contract's up. You let him walk in free agency next year, I believe it would be.
Yep.
But that's it. I don't see anything else really happening there.
So I want to just try to think about this because it's going to be tough, because I'm envisioning a scenario like you guys are laying out where David Johnson stays, they ride it out, and they have to eat that just one last year, and then they can let him walk in free agency next year. So Kenyan Drake is there. I think we all know that, going into week one, it'll probably play out that he's going to be the lead guy with David Johnson playing like a feature role. I don't know. They can't just work him to completely out the game plan. So, Kenyan Drake in that situation, Josh, I'm gonna ask you this guy or that guy. I'm gonna toss up a couple people here. So let's say Kenyan Drake or Austin Ekeler if Melvin Gordon is back as a Charger.
Oh, I still like Ekeler.
So Kenyan Drake or Miles Sanders, assuming Jordan Howard is gone.
Man, that's tough. That's where it starts getting tricky. I think I'd still prefer Miles Sanders just because we saw a little bit more from Sanders than we did from Drake. And I just think if Johnson's there, I mean, that's going to be a nightmare, man, if both of those backs are there, especially for us fantasy guys. I mean, that's going to be tough sledding.
Yeah, most definitely. What would you say, Jesse? Would you say Miles Sanders without Jordan Howard and he's got it to himself, or Kenyan Drake with David Johnson there?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me Miles Sanders. Give me the guy that flashed a lot of high upside last season. And even though Kenyan Drake did, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of his totals and where he ended up last season is really inflated by those final 3 weeks and then that one week 9 performance for him. Other than that, was kind of he's kind of off the radar, but I know he's got traded, switched teams. So either way, I think Miles Sanders has a clear path to work. I think he's got a clear path to volume, especially with Jordan Howard kind of being phased out there. I think it just makes more sense for Miles Sanders. I think what you're getting there. Doesn't have to deal with a whole lot of other stuff and waiting in the balance, wondering if his volume is going to come. Just so long as I know it sounds like Philly has a knack for just running these running back by committees that have like 7 different running backs and they all get 2 touches a game and you just have to hope one of them's near the goal line. But I still do like Miles Sanders plenty.
Yeah, I think he's going to be on the field a ton.
Right, exactly. Assuming one of these veterans doesn't come in, and even if they do, we saw Miles Sanders succeed with Jordan Howard out there. Yes, Howard was injured for a few games there, and we saw Sanders really excel. So you just have to hope that the Eagles really understand his talent. Not that they don't, but the approach and the game plan just isn't based around a feature back that's going to take the majority of the work there. One guy I want to throw out there is Chris Thompson. Not anybody special in fantasy that we're going to consider, but in PPR leagues, if he gets in the right situation, I think you're pretty happy with what you could get out of Chris Thompson. We're going to talk about best ball here. Chris Thompson's always a guy that you can consider in a best ball situation because you don't have to rely on every week production. If Chris Thompson, a scenario I'm envisioning, because we have, the show doc here and we have Peyton Barber, right? Who, Jesse, look, what did I tell you on Twitter? I said, get Peyton Barber out of Tampa Bay, right? Just get him out so I can figure out what's going on there. They don't have just these average running backs, just sitting there and not really doing anything in this prolific offense. So let's say Peyton Barber leaves and you got somebody like Chris Thompson to just step in there and finally give Jameis, a pass catching option. I think that would be really special there if you pair him with a Ronald Jones who is anything but special, but at least the roles there of, okay, Ronald Jones is going to run it up the gut. They're going to give him 15 carries. And then Chris Thompson, what does he get? 6-7 targets, in a given game, if he's in Tampa Bay in that situation. I just see that being the best possible scenario for somebody like Chris Thompson. And then you got Kareem Hunt, someone who I think that the Cleveland Browns are probably going to sign. Is that how you're looking at this right now, Josh, with Kareem Hunt?
Yeah, everything I'm hearing out of Cleveland is that the coaching staff, loves him, love the work he's put in. They want to bring him back, so they're going to pick up that fifth-year option, it sounds like. So, because from what I understand, when he was off, it still counted towards a full year. So this is coming up right now. So they pick that up. It's not guaranteed beyond this season, but I think both the Browns are comfortable with that because they want to make sure he doesn't screw up off the field, and they're give him another year of a leash, so to speak. So I think that makes absolutely the most sense for the Browns is that they're just going to go ahead and pick up that fifth-year option. It's going to be very affordable for them too. So, I have that Chubb and Hunt backfield last season was fantastic. So, I see no reason that they would want to go away from that. It's not like the Kenyan Drake and David Johnson situation where that's just going to be a super expensive backfield. This one's going to be super affordable with a second-round pick and, a guy get his fifth year on his rookie deal. So that's very affordable for the Browns.
Yeah, most definitely. And, going into a year where we can actually see, okay, we're going to have a full year of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Does that make you concerned for Nick Chubb? Not in Dynasty, Jesse, because I think we're good with Nick Chubb where he's at now in Dynasty. But does that make you second guess his redraft value where you're going to get him in redraft?
Absolutely, for this year, and especially if they plan on signing him to a long-term deal. If they really do like Kareem Hunt and they really do believe that he's going to be a focal point of their entire offense. Yeah, I get concerned about Nick Chubb this year in redraft and kind of beyond, depending on how they sign. They signed Kareem Hunt. So yeah, no, there's definitely some concern there. I think a lot of that receiving work and definitely goes kind of to Kareem Hunt. We saw Kareem Hunt have a fantastic couple games where he was just getting 10 plus receptions, I believe. Don't quote me, but I just remember seeing an inflated amount of receptions by Kareem Hunt. Once he did come back after that suspension, I saw some of that receiving work go to him. I don't think that necessarily affects Nick Chubb in the overall carries game. We still see him down the stretch log multiple over 20 carries in a game, but we did see him start to dwindle as the season went down. And we definitely saw his overall targets take a hit. We're talking through maybe he had more consistent game games of 4 or more targets down the stretch. But once Kareem Hunt does come back, we see those targets really kind of go down to 1 a game, 2 a game, the occasional 3 a game, but really not too much of that overall passing volume goes to him. So I think that's definitely a big concern. And I think Kareem Hunt does kind of warrant some consideration there when we're thinking about the upside of Nick Chubb. Will he be a top 5 or a running back 1 again without that passing volume? He can. He's good enough on the ground to be, but tempering expectations, maybe he's not that top 5 or maybe he's not that top 2 round pick anymore. I'm not sure yet. I have yet to kind of evaluate and put a valuation on Nick Chubb with Kareem Hunt there. That's
as far as I'm concerned, Chubb is an RB1, top 5 RB year to year without Kareem Hunt. I mean,
absolutely,
Nick Chubb is that guy. And
absolutely,
it makes a huge difference. You're right. The target share in these half-point PPR leagues, these PPR leagues, where you're not getting that reception volume that you want from Nick Chubb. Now, there's definitely the outcome of him still being able to be that top 3, top 5 talent, but it's just not as likely without the targets. And what we saw from Kareem Hunt last year, and I'll never forget, last season at one point, Jason Moore of the Fantasy Footballers, who puts things very plainly, very bluntly, and just the most simple they could be is, well, Kareem Hunt is walking into the Duke Johnson role, but he's way better than Duke Johnson. And it's like, exactly. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you're getting the same target share. You're in the same role, but you are potentially an elite running back in the NFL. I mean, it's a great situation.
He's getting more than the Duke Johnson workload. I mean, you saw him come in, like Jesse said, there were multiple games where he walked in and had, 9 targets. And then you look at Nick Chubb, and I mean, other than that week 9 contest where they were targeting the running backs heavily, he had no more than 3 targets. It was 1 or 2 targets every game after that. So it's tough, man. And how pissed are you if you're Nick Chubb and you're in the hunt for the rushing title and your coach gives you 13 carries in the final game?
Oh, and for a little bit of context,
I see what you did.
For a little bit of context too, we're looking at week 10 on 9 targets, week 11 8 targets, week 15 9 targets. Let's see, and then so that's 3 weeks of arguably wide receiver 1 passing opportunity there. That is absolutely major. And then you look at week 13, 5. You see him have a couple weeks of 3, but then you have week 13, 5. He had he only had less than 4 targets on 2 occasions when he came back. And that's just jumping right back into the fold. I mean, I'm sure they had some time to scheme him up and kind of, be like, okay, we're going to get Kareem Hunt involved in the passing game. We're going to have him involved here. But, I mean, that's just kind of him jumping back into the ship. Imagine a full offseason of them just scheming around the fact that they have an elite talent at running back. They have 2 elite talents at running back, and the way that they can deploy both of those guys, it's going to, I think we'll see it, kind of a cannibalization happening right there. But, so that's a cause for concern indefinitely.
All right, moving on real quick, guys, and it's been, a pleasure talking some fantasy football with you guys tonight. Jesse, again, thanks for coming on. But I want to talk about some best ball darlings for 2020. And I think we got a couple – well, we have one post-hype guy. And when you know it, Jesse, you're talking about a Charger.
Hey, I told you before this thing kicked off, I don't really know. I know enough to know that I don't know anything right now. So I'm going to go with what I actually do know. And my best ball darling right now would probably be Mike Williams. We saw him surpass 1,000 receiving yards this year for the first time in his career. Last year, we saw him really, really hit his stride, but it was more so in the fact that he had 10 touchdowns. So that was kind of a big deal. We saw regression in that area, but we saw him pick up in a more productive way in terms of receiving yards. This year is it's going to be an entirely new setting for this Chargers team. And really, Travis Benjamin just got released. I fully anticipate them to draft a wide receiver, but not within the first 3 rounds. More than likely, I don't think that they're going to draft a wide receiver anywhere. Probably, I should conservatively say 2 rounds, but realistically, I think 3rd round wide receiver. And even then, Mike Williams is a 1st round wide receiver with great metrics to back him up. More than anything, I think if they keep even some semblance of aggression inside that scheme with offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, I really, really think that with a new quarterback who's more accurate than Phillip Rivers, who can throw the ball a little bit more, I think you see Mike Williams just kind of skyrocket and be that fringe wide receiver 1, definite wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And he would just be one of those guys. I think people are on the fence about him right now. I think you can get him at a good value. And in best ball, I mean, you want to chase that upside. And I don't think there's very few guys in the league right now that have as much upside as a guy who has the talent of Mike Williams, who's going through all of this evolution right now in the scheme and the team that he's on. So count me up for that. Count me in for that entire ceiling play right there for best ball.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we already know that Mike Williams can get you 2 or 3 touchdowns in the game. That's the kind of guy you want on your best ball team. And Josh, you got another one of those guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, this best ball, my whole strategy is I'm going to get that Julio, that Michael Thomas, like that number 1 wide receiver first. And then, I mean, the rest of my roster is just going to be all of these major home run hitter, boomer bust wide receivers, because that's what seems to work in best ball. I mean, on a week-to-week basis, you never know who's going to go off. But we talked about him, 2 weeks ago. Hollywood Brown, I feel like he is just going to bust out in a big way. I feel like Mark Andrews is going to have some touchdown regression, and I think some of those touchdowns are going to go to Hollywood. I still feel that way. And I also like, if Robbie Anderson doesn't go to the Jets, even if he does, man, I mean, I put if he signs with Green Bay, but I mean, honestly, I love Robbie Anderson too. I mean, he's a huge swing for the fences guy, major deep ball threat. And, these are the guys that I love to fill my roster with. I mean, if I have 5-6 of these guys, I mean, you're taking the best score every week in best ball. So one of these guys is going to pay off on a weekly basis for you. So it's nice to kind of have that super safe floor with the stud wide receiver 1, and then just have your roster peppered with these guys.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, you got to have Hollywood Brown. We talked about him in Dynasty as being just, even slept upon in Dynasty right now. I mean, how could that
right.
be? But,
right.
Yeah, best ball, what kind of value are you going to get for him there? So, yeah, that's great value. And one of the best offenses last year. You're getting their wide receiver 1, and he's going to put together those games. And in best ball, of course, perfect kind of guy to draft in best ball. You don't have to rely on that week-to-week production. Sort of the same thing with my player. Of course, I'm actually projecting more consistency than a Hollywood Brown is Deontay Johnson. And look, that really is predicated on Ben Roethlisberger's health. Of course, the elbow injury is one to look at as a concern. But assuming that we have full health from Big Ben, I'm liking Deontay Johnson a lot. I mean, we have Juju Smith-Schuster, who obviously is more of a slot receiver, can definitely play the outside. But in this offense, how I'm looking at it, you got Deontay, who plays that, talk about scheme here, that wide receiver 1, and the slot is Juju. And then you have the other side, the deep threat is James Washington. Deontay Johnson can be that deep threat too. He had 92 targets last season in his rookie year, with a cluster of terrible quarterback play midway through the season. I mean, whether it was Hodges or Rudolph, and I was a Mason Rudolph truther before last season. So me talking about Mason Rudolph in that light is very disappointing at this point. But no, if it's Ben Roethlisberger, I'm all in on Deontay Johnson. Give me some of that. He caught 5 touchdowns last season. A couple of those were with Roethlisberger. So we already saw early on that there was that chemistry. I think that in redraft, Johnson is going to be one of those guys who you can get at value. I mean, it's not going to hurt you to draft him at all. Everyone obviously is going to draft Juju Smith-Schuster highly, probably dropping down to a 3rd-round pick this season. But Deontay Johnson's somebody you're going to get value in both best ball and redraft.
Yeah, I love that. We talked about the Steelers don't have a good, valid quarterback option behind Big Ben. So having a full season of Big Ben, that's what the Steelers do, man. They bring in these wide receivers, and they always perform, man. So I'd say there's a good track record there in Pittsburgh for that being a success.
Oh, most definitely. Until Teddy B comes in and kills it with Pittsburgh.
Teddy.
I'm pushing for Teddy B to Pittsburgh, man. I want to see that. When Big Ben goes down, I want to see Teddy B just back there, Tomlin calling the shots, and him just having a blast of the playoffs. I want to see that story.
Yeah, you might get some Shady McCoy there too for.
There you go.
His final tour of duty.
Man.
All right, guys. Yeah, this has been fun. Thanks a lot. Go find Jesse Reeves on Twitter. Where can they find you on Twitter, Jesse?
Yeah, at Jesse Reeves FF. Pretty simple. You guys can check out all the work. I explained it earlier on at the beginning of the podcast. All my work over at Player Profiler. Bunch of cool stuff dropping right now. So yeah, just keep up with the timeline if you're interested in any of the work that I'm doing, anything I talked about tonight. Just look for it on Twitter.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, on behalf of Josh Daly, my name is Steve Petroni. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Hot Take Podcast.